Hey everybody, how you doing? Tekking here, and welcome back to the Gotei 13 Lieutenant or Vice Captain series, whatever you want to call them. Today's video is going to be on the third seat Vice Lieutenant Izuru Kira. And Kira is definitely the one that has the death note, of course, and he's going to make a perfect world for everybody, but, oh wait, no, that's a different Kira. This is this Kira. Okay, so, I mean, like, it's there. I mean, like, I might as well make the reference right out of the gate. There was a Bleach abridged way back in the early days of YouTube, like right around the time like Naruto abridged, and I think it might even have been before like Team 4-Star did Dragon Ball abridged. It was like, I think Semi-Soma was the name of the guy that did it, and during like Kira's first introduction when he fought against Momo after Aizen was killed, they did the joke of like, I am Kira! And I'm like, alright, there it is, okay. So, Izuru is definitely one of the more prominent lieutenants, next to Shuhei, next to Renji, Rangiku, gets a lot of screen time in the series, or at least more screen time than, like, Chojuro or Nanao got. I guess I should bring this up right out of the gate, though. I'm a little bit, I do want to do a video on Renji. I did do a video on Renji, like, years ago. I did a video on Zabimaru a little while ago, but should I also do a video on Rukia? I just say that because, like, Rukia is one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite character in all of Bleach, so I've made a lot of videos about her, so I don't mind. I'll do another video on Rukia. It's perfectly fine for me to do that. But I'm just saying, because I've already talked about Renji and Rukia because they're main cast members so much, should I make another video for this series? But whatever, let me know of your thoughts on that down below. So, Izuru, you know what? I was going to maybe start this off in a similar way that I started off Momo's video, where Momo was just like, oh, poor Momo, right? All the crap she had to live through. Izuru had to live through a lot of it. I mean, hell, look at the volume 15 cover right here. Izuru just walking through his jail cell, just awash in despair. Despair is going to be the word of the day in this episode. We're probably going to be using that quite a bit because Izuru uses it quite a bit. Also, fun fact, I believe this is volume 15 of the Tankobon. Ichigo was supposed to be on the cover because it's volume 15 and his name and everything like that. But Kubo decided to change it for Izuru, and I think it works a lot better there. So whereas Momo and Izuru did have a lot to struggle with the idea that both of their captains, Shuhei as well, that all three of their captains had betrayed the Soul Society, they each handle it in very different ways. Momo, for the most part, really does shut down, but to be fair, Momo kind of had it the worst, because, you know, even with Izuru and Shuhei, like, Aizen specifically, like, stabbed Momo right in the chest as he explained to her that everything was a lie, right? And so, the relationship between Izuru and Gin and then Shuhei and Tozen was not quite the same kind of thing. Like, Momo really looked up to Aizen. I mean, not to say that, you know, Izuru didn't look up to, you know, Gin or anything like that. He did, but, you know, Momo was like, oh my god, Captain Aizen, he's so great, he's so awesome, he's like the best captain in the Gotei, and he's my captain, isn't that so great? And then, ugh! And so Momo really did shut down after all that, and like kind of tried to just block it out of her memory and trying to explain it to herself, like, oh, that couldn't have been what really had happened, there had to have been something else, like Aizen had to have been being controlled by somebody, like that couldn't have been him, there has to be some other explanation. She just wouldn't accept the reality. When it came to Izuru, he certainly struggled with it, but he accepted the reality for what it was. Same thing with Shuhei. Shuhei kind of got to the point where he was on a mission, where he was like, okay, I have to take on Captain Tozen, or Kaname Tozen. I have to be the one to fight him and bring him to justice, okay? And Komamura also was in on that as well. Izuru was not as, like, dedicated to that, where it's like, I'm gonna hunt down Captain Ichimaru and I'm gonna show him what he did, you know, nothing like that. I think after the Soul Society arc, yeah, it took him some time to really come to terms with everything, but he accepted the reality for what it was, and he knew that, like, okay, Captain Ichimaru is a traitor to the Soul Society, and I think he maybe looked at it in more like of a way of like, okay, now the third seat is under my control. All right, I have to kind of lead these people after our captain, defected. How am I going to do this? And Izuru is certainly, he's a very reserved individual. It's kind of difficult for him to be in that kind of leadership position, even though when he was a lieutenant, he still had leadership position. But when it came to Izuru, after a brief period where he was kind of like awash in that despair, he came out of that mostly because of the help with his friends, you know, because like him and Shuhei are really good friends, and Rangiku, they'll often be hanging out, like getting drunk or whatever, drinking sake. I can imagine after the Soul Society and arc and everything, and even Izuru goes to apologize to Rangiku after their little fight that they had at the end of that arc. Rangiku kind of tells him, you know, it's okay, thank you for apologizing to me, though. None of us could have really seen what happened here. You know, Aizen kind of played all of us. Tozen and Gin, they kind of all did. I would imagine after going out and drinking with Shuhei and Renji and Rangiku, you know, Izuru kind of like, you know, explained everything, and you know, he didn't like, he wasn't happy about it, of course, but he was like, okay, this is the situation. Captain Ichimaru defected. He was always like a traitor. I have to accept that, and I have to move on, and it's my job now to be in charge of the 3rd Division. It's my duty to lead these men who were also betrayed by the captain. Meanwhile, you have Momo in the medical ward. She's unconscious. And then Shuhei also kind of steps up to become the leader of the 9th Division. But like I said, Shuhei had a much more like, I need to go and I need to deal with Captain Tozen. I don't think Izuru really ever had that like sort of dedicated, like, you know, it's my job to bring Captain Ginichimaru, ex-Captain Ginichimaru, to justice. I don't really remember that at all. And that kind of does deal with his personality. So if you were going to embody Shuhei's character with the way that his personality is and the way that he talked about this with Findor during their fight, it's very much the idea of fear. The idea that as a Shinigami, you should fear your own sword, you should fear your own strength, because that kind of, in a way, keeps it in check. Because we are Shinigami, our job is to fight against hollows and reap souls and, you know, carry them over and everything like that. And we have a lot of duties that we need to fulfill as Shinigami, but you should also have that fear of your own blade, in a sense, you know, so you know, the danger and the power that you hold within yourself, okay? That was kind of the message that Shuhei exhibited, taught to him by Tozen, who Tozen kind of flipped that around, so it's more of Shuhei's philosophy now than it was Tozen's. But then you get to Izuru. Izuru's philosophy is not so much fear, it really is kind of despair, or to use another term, regret. It's almost like every single fight that Izuru is forced to get involved in, because that's his duty as a lieutenant or a vice captain of the Gotei 13, he feels massive amounts of regret and despair through that. And this is exemplified in his battle against Baragon's Fraction, Avirama Redder. Okay, and because, you know, just like how Findor and Shuhei's personalities were kind of flipped, Redder's personality was very boisterous, and he loved battle, he loved war, and he was just like, come on, man, you gotta get pumped up for a battle, yeah, we're gonna fight, I'm the Fraction of the 2nd Espada, Baragon Luisenbaum, who are you? Give me your name, give me your rank, let's fight, let's do this, let's chest bump, yeah! You know, that was Avirama Redder, and Izuru the entire time is just like, oh god, why did I have to fight this guy? Can I switch? Is it too early? Is it too late to switch? Alright, okay, guess I'm fighting this guy. Because Izuru just, he doesn't have it in him to get that pumped up with a battle. Like, that's Kenpachi Zaraki kind of philosophy. If Zaraki was gonna write a book, it would just be titled, Fight! You know, like, Fight! Written by Kenpachi Zaraki, and then there's like a picture of him in the back, he's like smoking a pipe, he has glasses on, he's just like, you know, the author, Kenpachi Zaraki, has been in over 3,000 fights in the last 100 years. You know, all that kind of stuff, right? But no, Izuru just doesn't have it in him. He's just like, the concept of being pumped up or excited or like invigorated to go into battle or war, I simply don't have that. Don't you understand that battle and war is, just by its very essence, its very nature, a ghastly, horrible thing? You know, fighting and war should literally be the last thing that anybody would want to do at any given time. And here you are standing before me getting all excited over it? Like, and Izuru doesn't go long into it. He just basically tells them, like, your philosophy on life and my philosophy on life are like polar opposites, buddy. I will never understand your viewpoints, and, you know, Avirama Redder would not understand Izuru's. So it's like, you know, listen, I am a soldier of the Gotei 13. I'm a lieutenant, and I was tasked with preventing anything from destroying this pillar. So I'm going to fulfill my task. I would prefer, personally, in my own opinion, to not fight. But let that be known, though, I am a Shinigami, so I have to. But that doesn't mean I have to like it, okay? So it's kind of similar to Shuhei in that regard. And so he fights against Avirama, and he uses some cool techniques. He uses Tenron, which is that Kido that has, like, the whirlwind, like the twister. That was really cool. They're jumping around buildings and everything. Eventually, Izuru releases his Zanpakuto, Wabisuke. We'll get to that in a moment. He releases Wabisuke, and he's fighting Avirama a little bit. Avirama fights by using his Resurrection, which turns his body into, like, a hawk or, like, an eagle, like a large bird of prey. And he can fire off his feathers from the wings, and he mentions each one of the feathers are like, they weigh a lot. They're like weigh as much as like a big piece of stone, because it's basically like stone feathers he's firing off that are like destroying the buildings around them, like missiles and stuff. And so that's actually the perfect target for Wabisuke, because its ability is to double the weight indefinitely, from what we understand, of whatever it cuts or whatever it comes in contact with. So this is one of those situations where right out of the gate you can kind of see a path of victory for Izuru. You can be like, my god, his ability is to use wings to fire super heavy feathers. Oh my god, Izuru's got this in the bag, right? And he really does. I mean, it really didn't give any impression that Izuru... I think they extend it in the anime like they do with all the battles, like, oh no, you know, as soon as Avirama goes into his Resurrection, it's like, oh no, Izuru's in a little bit of trouble here. But it's nothing that really gets you to the point where, like, he's gonna lose or anything. So after Avirama just keeps going on and on and on about how awesome battle is, and you gotta let out a mighty roar, a war cry, come on! Izuru kind of shows up, takes out Wabisuke, whoosh, whoosh, and like slashes his wings. I think there's a moment where he kind of ups his Resurrection's power a little bit and more wings come out, so he's got 4 wings, and he's like, even though you've doubled the weight of my wings, I can still fly! And then Izuru does the crazy tactic. It's like, all right, I'm just gonna cut him again then. Whoosh, whoosh. Because it literally doubles indefinitely. From what we understand, that's the power of Wabisuke, okay? So eventually he just cuts him like 2 more times, and he's like quadrupled the weight of his wings at this point, and it drops him, and he can't move. And so the same basic idea with the sword is you're bowing on the ground, unable to do anything but like lift your head up at Izuru. And then that's when Izuru explains the flower of the 3rd division. I think it's the only time in the canon of Bleach where the symbolism of the flowers that represent each of the Gotei 13 divisions actually comes into play, where he actually explains the symbol of the 3rd division is the marigold, and it's a flower that represents despair. And then that's where he goes on to his whole thing about battle and war. It's like, it's a very ghastly thing. We should never be excited about going to war. It should be the last thing that we should have to do. And if we do, if push comes to shove, like it did with Aizen, and we do have to go to war, we should not do it with excitement or like joy. It should be a thing that we march off to, and regardless of whether or not we win or we lose, you know, it shouldn't be something that we take joy in. So it's just like, okay, that's the situation, that's my philosophy. And also throughout the fight, Avirama Redder was kind of saying to Izuru, like, you know, what's with that weird shaped sword that you have? And Izuru's Shikai resembles, I always thought it looked like a fish hook, like whenever he used it, because it makes his sword like a 90-degree kind of angle, so it looks like a fish hook. Like if him and Shuhei were to go fishing, Shuhei could use the chain of Kazeshini to wrap around Wabisuke and put some bait on the end of that and just throw it into the water. There they go, they're fishing, they're buddies. But no, Izuru kind of explains, he's like, oh yeah, that's right, you also said that my sword looked weird. It was like a weird shape. Okay, well, it's about to make sense to you in about 5 seconds, and it'll be the last thing that makes sense to you. So, as Avirama's on the ground, unable to really move other than just, like, lift his head up at Izuru, Izuru flips his sword around and kind of puts the hook end of Wabisuke beneath Avirama. So it's like, yeah, you can see where this is going. Yeah, okay. And to add even more of a grim nature to it, I think the way that it's shown off screen in the anime, where Izuru is just kind of like, and, you know, cuts Avirama's head off, decapitates him, like reverse way, and then that ends the fight, that kills him. But to think about this in an even more grisly fashion, when Izuru pulled up he didn't even have to pull up hard because it doubles the weight of anything it touches. So all he has to do is knock them down with the power, immobilizing their limbs, or their wings in this case, and then he just has to put the sword at their neck, and then just boop, and then gravity will do the rest for you, because it just touches you, it doubles the weight of your neck, and then he probably doesn't even have to move it that much. He just like, that's pretty dark. That's pretty grim. That is fairly ghastly and full of despair, I would say. And the whole time Izuru's doing that, he's like, I just hope you understand, I get no pleasure out of this. This is actually the last thing I want to do, is go to fight with some random bird man and decapitate him. I don't want to be here right now, but this is what we're doing, so, and then he slices off his head, and then he wins his fight. Later on, he shows up alongside Shuhei to help fight against Aion. Shuhei goes down, and we find out, actually, fun fact about Izuru, I don't think this is mentioned anywhere else in the canon of the manga, maybe in a data book, maybe in a light novel or something. Izuru used to be a member of the 4th Division, which I'm actually kind of interested in, because we know when he was at the academy, it seemed to imply right after that he graduated, and because Aizen kind of saw the potential that Izuru, Momo, and Renji exhibited, that he transferred them, like, okay, Izuru's gonna go to the 3rd Division under Gin. So maybe it was, because remember, Aizen was the captain, and then Gin was his lieutenant for a very long time. So maybe it was before Gin headed up his own division that, very briefly, Izuru was in the 4th Division. And it works a lot for him, because the 4th Division is the medical and support division, which typically do not do any fighting, okay? They're there to heal. And so, given Izuru's personality and his, you know, kind of philosophy on fighting, which he had long before he even joined the 3rd Division, that would have been the perfect place for him, you know, to be in that kind of place. And he probably would have excelled if he would have stayed in the 4th Division. He might have even become, like, a high-ranking seated officer. Instead of, like, Imura being the 3rd seat, maybe Izuru would have been the 3rd seat. Or hell, maybe he might have even become the lieutenant instead of Isane. I don't know, because Isane was really good at healing as well. But Izuru, if he stayed with the division and trained, then he might have gotten up there. I do question the logic of, when you're going to war, only having one person on your side with medical talents, and even then medical talents that even Izuru himself admitted are very rusty, because after everybody got knocked down by Aion, you know, Rangiku's missing part of her freaking stomach, and Shuhei gets beaten down and everything, and it's like, it's only up to Izuru, until Hachi and then Urahana shows up at the very end, only Izuru has any sort of, like, healing Kaido knowledge, right? So it's like, he's like, okay, yeah, I used to be in the 4th Division a couple decades back. I can kind of remember how healing Kaido works. Okay, we'll do that. You know, it's like, you couldn't have sent anybody else, and you sent the 2 healers to Hueco Mundo of all places? Like, that doesn't seem very logical to me, Yamamoto. I'm just saying. It's just like, you're going to the war, you should bring some healer to you, and then maybe another one to, you could have just sent Hanatsuro himself to Hueco Mundo with Byakuya, and that would have been good enough, but you sent, like, 3 of the greatest healers to Hueco Mundo so they wouldn't be there in that fight. That was just a little bit confusing to me. But anyway, so yeah, let's talk about Wabisuke, though. Now, in the English dub, it's translated as the penitent one, as somebody that bows their heads in penance, okay? In the Japanese version, the direct translation is the wretched one, Wabisuke. Kubo has come out and said, because people have asked him about, like, oh, what about, like, some of the lieutenants' Bankais, or some of the Bankais that we haven't seen in the story, and Kubo directly mentioned Izuru as an example, and the word he used to describe Izuru's Bankai, the way he described it was like, well, I have an idea, or, like, a general concept for what Izuru's Bankai would be, but it would just be too, creepy, or disgusting, or repulsive. It's some word akin to that. I like to go with the idea of, like, wretched or creepy, because it's like the whole concept around Izuru, and when you look at his sword, Wabisuke, especially the Zanpakuto design, and remember, Kubo's the one that drew the designs for the Zanpakutos, so Wabisuke looks like this, an emaciated, skeletal man, yo-ho-ho-ho, that has a giant gravestone weighing him down on his back, long hair, and he's just like a zombie. He's just like this guy that's just like constantly bearing this weight and this giant heavy ball on his side, and he's just like weighed down by this, and he can barely move. And that's Wabisuke. That is the true form of his Zanpakuto, and as we find out later, that's like the subconscious of Izuru. And so I think that's where the whole despair and regret things come from. It's like I could see most Shinigami in the academy when they learn about fighting against hollows and everything like that, and having to defend the Seirete and having to go to war if they really have to. Most Shinigami just accept that and go forward. Most Shinigami are just like, yeah, we're gonna fight the hollows. They're just monsters. They're evil spirits. We're gonna wipe them all out. You know, that kind of shit. But then it comes to Izuru and also Shuhei, a few other students in the academy that kind of take a step back and look at the bigger picture and kind of have a different philosophy on all this stuff, where maybe Izuru looks at it like, yeah, the hollows are like quote unquote monsters, but they used to be human souls. It's not like they just came into existence out of nothing. It's like they used to be souls. Like, in a different way, in a different life, we could have ended up as hollows. I could have ended up as a hollow under different circumstances. And it's like, I don't view them as like taking their lives as like something that should be like, oh yeah, I'm doing the work of the Soul King. I'm wiping out all the monsters. It's like, no, these are still souls. They're corrupted, hungry, kind of evil souls, but still souls nonetheless. And so it's like every single time Izuru has to fight a hollow, or every single time he has to exterminate a threat to the Shinigami, to the Soul Society, he feels more and more regret. He feels more and more guilt and despair, and that just adds to his subconscious, and that was kind of what gave birth to Wabisuke, the wretched one, the one that always bows his head in penance. That is what the essence of his sword comes down to, and then that's twisted in a really dark way with like the reverse guillotine shit, you know? So that's how I view Izuru's character. Very gloomy. Also can view it with like the hairstyle and everything. Man, he's really emo, but it comes from a perspective of like someone that is in a war that really, really hates being in a war. But it's like he's so far in at this point, he feels like, I really can't do anything else. Like, this is the situation. You know, through powers kind of beyond my control in a lot of respects, I am now the lieutenant of a division of the Gotei 13. There are men that, you know, come to me for leadership and to, you know, especially after Ginichimaru defected, you know. There was that arc, the Amagai arc, where Shusuke Amagai, and then there was that other dude that became the third seat. I forget that dude's name. Was it like Kudo or something? I forget. I actually, that's probably my least favorite out of all of the Bleach fillers. I watched that arc one time when it originally aired on Adult Swim, like way back in like 2010 or whatever, and after that I just never rewatched it. I mean, the only cool thing about that arc to me was the scene at the very end where Amagai went into his flaming shell Bankai and he fought against Ichigo, and Ichigo went into his hollow form. Like that was a really cool fight, but I didn't really care much beyond that. But I really probably should go back and watch it, because that arc did focus on Izuru a lot, because the premise was the 3rd Division got a new captain, Shusuke Amagai, and Izuru was the lieutenant, so there was a lot of stuff involving Izuru in that arc that I can kind of sort of remember. I'm just not perfect there remembering. But yeah, I mean, like, that's Izuru's character, right? And it's just like, that when Kubo was mentioning his Bankai, he said, I'm probably never going to draw it for that reason. Like, Kubo himself probably had that moment. I'm sure a lot of artists get to that point where he has, like, the concept for it, but there's no way that he could maybe properly convey it on paper in the manga itself to really represent everything that it really meant to be. Or maybe to look at it another way, maybe because, you know, Bleach is still a shonen manga, the way that Kubo might have wanted to show it, that level of, like, despair, it might have been a little bit too serious for a shonen manga. It might have been something that's like, okay, this needs to be a seinen to really properly convey what this thing is. And for that reason, we never get to see Izuru's Bankai. I don't even think in the light novels or anything, because I was doing some research and everybody was commenting on some stuff, extra stuff about Izuru and all that. You know, so thank you all for that. There was a scene in the 13 Blades data book, and I actually did a video on this years ago, where he fought against Shaz Domino, Domino, the Stern Ritter that was actually shown only once in the manga and then completely disappeared, and we were all like, what happened to Shaz Domino? We never found out what his letter was. We later find out he's Stern Ritter Sigma, and was a creation of Gremmy, the Stern Ritter V, the Visionary. So, you know, Gremmy could create artificial Stern Ritters with his imagination powers. His imagination powers! Man, I can't wait until the scene in the freaking anime when we finally get to that, where Kenpachi just slices Gremmy apart. That'll be a fun scene, when Gremmy summons a meteor and then Kenpachi just cuts it up. Man, I'm looking forward to that, but that's still gonna be a ways off from there. But that was Shaz Domino, and then there's a scene at the Central 46 where Izuru fights with him, and that was the fight that occurred, right? So, also, during the, well, I guess, you know, one more thing I guess I should say. So because of Gin's backstory with Rangiku, that was kind of what Kubo chose to focus on in the latter part of the arc. But with Izuru, it was like, I think there was a moment where Gin was like, ah, yes, Izuru, it seems he's finally overcome my absence, or something like that, but we don't get anything more into it. There's never a moment in the arc where Izuru, like, confronts Gin, and it's like, I have to be the one to finish you. But no, it's focused on Rangiku at the very end, when Rangiku goes to cradle Gin's body before he dies. Okay, and so I'm sure Rangiku and Izuru talk about this afterwards, and Izuru might have been just, you know, defeated, unconscious at this point already as well. But yeah, it's a very weird thing where it's like you had the moment with Shuhei and Tozen, even kind of a moment between Momo and Aizen. It was the moment where Aizen used his Zanpakuto to, you know, make it an illusion that they attacked Momo instead of him, but it was still a moment. But we don't really get any, like, overt moments between Izuru and Gin in the last arc. It was like Ichigo versus Gin, and then Rangiku getting involved with all that after Aizen kills him. So yeah, so after that though, I guess he just goes back to being the 3rd Division captain until eventually Rose takes over. And in the final arc, we find out some interesting stuff. It's not really explained. We don't go into a lot of detail. But when Rose was fighting against Najakoop, when he was fighting against him, Stern Ritter Yu, he talked about how, you know, Izuru was, you know, defeated in the last battle when Izuru had the giant hole blasted through his freaking chest and lost an arm. And it was like, it's like literally there was like this much of flesh keeping his body, you know, upright, right? And it's like his spine and everything was just incinerated by Basby. And Rose is like, you know, Izuru was a constant source of inspiration to me. Like, whenever I was around Izuru, you know, just the songs aboard my my flying V, just, it spilled out of me, the creative power of that man. And so Izuru was really important to Rose, and then Rose got into fighting against Nanana, and we don't really get to see how that fight went, but yeah, so that's an interesting thing there, a little bit about their relationship. Like, we get a little bit about how Momo and Shinji got along, and of course Kensei was like Shuhei's like mentor growing up, or like his inspiration to become a member of the Gotei. Don't get that much with Izuru and Rose. I also remember in the last episode so far of the Bleach anime, that's fun to say, last episode so far, when we get the ending credits scene when Last Moment is playing, we cut to a scene of Izuru drinking with like Rangiku and Shuhei and everybody, and we don't hear what he's saying, but we get little thought bubbles over him. Like, the implication is like, man, that new captain, Rojiro Otorobashi, or Rose, whatever you want to call him, man, I don't know how to handle that guy. He's so different than Gin. I don't know what to do. It seemed like he was sort of complaining about him, but that was like right as soon as, you know, he joined. So maybe they got on better terms with each other. I don't know. So yeah, in the Fake Karakura Town, not the Fake Karakura, in the final Year Blood War arc, he gets attacked by Basby. First, like, casualty of the battle, really, honestly, where he gets, burner finger right through the chest and giant hole. And Izuru's gone for, like, the rest of the entire last arc. Like, he shows up once in a bonus chapter, chapter 520.5, which is a chapter mainly focusing on Shuhei, but you also see one panel of Izuru being worked on in the lab by Mayuri and Nemu, and you see his, like, chest wound, and he's all hooked up to tubes and pipes, and Mayuri's like, "Ah, yes, we can fix him, Nemu, with science! But not just any science, mad science! The most maddest science I've ever cooked up!" And so he does that. And so we know he's still alive, it's just he's in very, very critical condition, and he's probably gonna turn into some kind of Frankenstein's monster-esque character, given the fact that Mayuri himself is working on him, right? But hey, he does survive. And in the final, like, 10 chapters of this manga, like, I think it was it was right after the fight with Shunsui and Nanao, that we talked about last time, where Lilia Barrow falls down from the royal palace into a bunch of flamingos made out of light, as you do, and the person that showed up there to fight against these flamingos was Izuru. Cyborg Izuru, with pipes and things jutting out of him. Like, he had, like Mayuri basically took, like, pieces of, like, rebar and, like, stuck it inside of it so he had, like, support so he could actually, like, stand upright. You think Mayuri would have, like, you know, patched up the hole or something, like, taken some metal or some kind of prosthetic and, like, actually made, like, a robotic, like, you know, torso or something for Izuru. But no, Mayuri literally just reworks it so it's some kind of mad scientist freaking experiment, because he is a mad scientist, hooks up a few, like, pipes and strings and stuff, and he's like, "Ah, you'll be okay." And so this is how Izuru has to live now. This is existence for him, and I think it was even explained in the data book in the light novel or whatever, like, living in this state causes him constant agony. Like, no shit, would it not cause you constant agony? You got a giant hole in your stomach. How do you even eat? How do you even move? You know, it's like Mayuri's like, we can reroute his spinal cord so it runs on Bluetooth. So his spinal cord starts here, and then gets sent over here to the lower half of his body, so he should still be able to move. It'll just be excruciatingly painful. It's like, it's Mayuri, so I get it, but jeez, you know what I mean? So he shows up, he still's got his Wabisuke, looks amazing, looks badass. You get the impression that Kubo is like, alright, I really wanted to show a fight with zombie cyborg Izuru. I really wanted to show a fight with him, but the manga's gonna be ending. I need to wrap this up. He was getting into the final battles here with Ichigo and Yuha and everybody. So you get the impression, at least from my perspective, Kubo was like, alright, I'm not gonna be able to show it, but I'm drawing this damn scene. I am drawing the badass scene with zombie cyborg Izuru with the moon behind his giant gaping chest wound, holding Wabisuke, looking all morose and just being like, "It seems I have to take care of this. My heart aches." Like, oh, the poetry just exudes off of him. And he's like, I'm still drawing that, even if it doesn't go anywhere. And I think in the light novels and stuff, it goes more beyond that. But yeah. Also, speaking of poetry, Izuru, little fun fact, is also very gifted at haikus. Do you want to hear a haiku? I'll read one of Izuru's haikus. This is one of the ones that he actually got an award from the Seirei Bulletin that Shuhei runs. And I suck at haikus, by the way, but this is Izuru Kira's award-winning haiku. The persimmon tree bears fruit. Ah, the persimmon tree bears fruit again this year. Izuru does not like persimmons. And by the way, in case you don't know what a persimmon is, here you go. Yeah, but yeah, he doesn't like them very much. Gin likes them, but he doesn't. So he's just like, that's the point of the haiku. Like, this year the persimmon tree bears fruit. And this year it bears fruit again. So it's like a double meaning, where first off, it's just like he really hates persimmons. But then another version is Gin really liked persimmons, and then he defected. So he betrayed everybody, so I can see why this won the award. You know, it kind of has more layers to it than just the persimmons. I've never tried persimmons, actually. Anyway, that's Izuru Kira. He doesn't like persimmons, he likes haiku, he has a very, very depressing sword, and his philosophy is around despair itself. And he has a cool hairstyle. I do like Izuru's hairstyle. If I was going to pick my favorite hairstyle out of all of the lieutenants, I mean, yeah, Renji's is pretty cool. The red pineapple style, you know. I like my Maurizio has this little, like, antenna sticking out of his head over here. You know, Shuhei's got the really edgy hairstyle. But I would probably say Izuru is my favorite in that one particular instance. So, yeah, I feel like at this point you could probably have, like, just like how Can't Fear Your Own World all focuses on Shuhei as the main character. I feel like at this point you could probably have a light novel series, maybe not a series, maybe like just a single light novel or something, focused entirely on Izuru, like the Ballad of Zombie Izuru. So it's like, it's not even like his own philosophy anymore. It's like at this point I imagine Izuru just wants to be dead, but he was literally brought back to life as like a Frankenstein's monster, okay? And he lives every day in constant pain. I imagine like he's leaking fluids all the time. He has to constantly like readjust his valves and make sure he probably can't eat or drink normally. He probably has to like eat some sort of specially formulated medical paste in order to survive or get nutrients. His life is probably a living hell, and he probably lives every day like, why is this living? Why did you do this to me, Mayuri? Why? You know, I would have much rather have just, like, left, you know, but at any rate, that's what he has now. I feel like there's more you could do with the story here, you know what I'm saying? At any rate, that's Izuru Kira, everybody. Comment below on what you think his Bankai could possibly be. You know, like, I really don't know. I mean, because the way Kubo kept it so ambiguous, like, oh, it's too disgusting, it's too creepy for me to draw, I couldn't possibly do that. That kind of opens up, like, levels of, like, all right, how dark are we gonna go with this, really, you know? So let me know how you think about that below. So yeah, we only have a few of these left. I mean, we do have Renji, we have Nemu, Yachiru. I think that's Rukia, if you want to include her too, but I guess I'll save her for the very end because I've already talked about her so much. Oh, people have also mentioned Mashiro, because Mashiro Kuna is the super lieutenant of the 9th Division, so I might talk about her at the end as well. I'm not really sure about that, but yeah, let's try this out here. Round and round and round it goes. This way, I don't know. All right. I'm gonna say here, and whichever one's closest. Momo and Nanao. I want to talk about Nemu next. We're talking about Nemu next. Okay, let's talk about Nemu next. Lieutenant of the 12th Division, under Mayuri Kurotsuchi, because she's really cool. She has a really badass moment in the last arc against Pernida and everything. So, talking about Nemu next time. Thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Tekking and Barry signing out.